to create a healthy, vibrant world? And more to the point, why are we not achieving what we all sense is possible? Slide, please. My relationship to these questions came about 20 years ago when my business partner, Dimitri Petropoulos, and I had the opportunity to buy the business turnaround firm where we were both working. And we had a choice at that point. We could continue on the path that we were already on, a comfortable path, or we could go with the path that was in our hearts. And that was the path of making the world a better place. We quickly started consulting to community organizations, and it was such fun. We were all over the country and all over the continent working with folks who were actually doing the work on the ground. And we were at the top of our game in absolutely every way. Clients loved the work that we were doing. Except that after 5 years, we realized that we had been working with groups all across the continent, and that none of their communities were any better off. We had changed our lives to change the world, and nothing was changing. The more we talk with people around communities and around the world now, the more we realize that our frustration was absolutely not unique, that many of you may be feeling that frustration, that we're working harder and harder and the problems still remain. Poverty, AIDS, education. And so we started to look at what is going on here. Let's look at these plans that these people are doing, and whether they're nonprofit organizations, whether they're businesses, whether they're government offices, whether they're volunteer groups, social enterprises. Let's look at those plans. And the more we looked at their plans, the more we actually started to look at strategic planning itself. We learned that strategic planning actually has its origins in the battlefields of ancient Greece. The word strategos actually means a high-ranking military official. And so strategic planning is really good and really intended for winning short-term battles. But it absolutely cannot create the healthy, vibrant, resilient, humane world that we all want. Well, realizing this, Dimitri and I took out of the closet that old business turnaround hat, and we put it back on and we dusted it off, only this time we aimed it at strategic planning itself. And the moment we did that, everything we thought we knew about how change happens flew out the window. We had been under the assumption that change is hard, that change happens slowly, it happens incrementally. And that's not the change we were seeing. The change we were seeing was joyful and graceful. And it was happening so fast that groups actually couldn't catch up with how fast the change was happening. What was at the root of this were two questions. What kind of world do we really want? And what is the path that will get us there? Slide, please. So what kind of world do we really want? When we ask groups, they tell us that they want a world without AIDS. They want a world without poverty. They want to fix the broken education system. And what we found, very much like what Carrie was talking about before, is that we talk about what we don't want, but that we're not really talking about the world we do want. We started to think about this in terms of the math we learned in grade school. Next slide, please. In grade school, we learned that if we add a +1 to a -1, we get 0, right? And what we found is if we eliminate a negative condition in our communities, we're not achieving something possible and powerful. We're achieving 0. We're getting to stasis. But when we aim for +1 and we aim for what's possible, that's where our power is. And our power is there for a couple of reasons. First of all, we can't have a healthy, vibrant world if we have poverty. So we have to cure poverty. But we're not doing it just focused right there. What we're doing is aiming and curing poverty on the way to what's possible, on the way to something bigger and better. The other reason, though, that our power lies in what's possible is because it's actually more practical to aim for what's possible. And I'm going to share a little bit about how that works in just a couple minutes. So we know where we're aiming. Our first question, what do we really want? We want what's at that end. We want that healthy, vibrant, thriving world. Okay, Hildy, so how are you going to get there? And that's what groups always would say to us. Okay, it's great. We've got this great vision. We all have this wonderful, what are we all going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya and it'll all be there. Well, what we found is that we actually know how to create the path to the future we want. Slide, please. And each and every one of you know how to do it and have probably done it today. If I were to ask you guys, I need to be at the airport tomorrow and I need to know what time to set my alarm, what would you ask me? What time is my flight, right? And we would walk backwards from the time of my flight. My flight is at noon. It's going to take about an hour at the airport. It'll take me about 20 minutes to get there. I've got to still pack. I've got to take care of the dog. I've got to get the house ready for the house sitter. I probably shouldn't go to bed tonight. We do this every single day in everything in our lives. We reverse engineer everything in our lives. When your baby is born and you want to figure out how much money to save for college, when we have a big event coming up, a wedding or a conference, it's how you guys got here on time tonight. We reverse engineer every single thing in our lives except when we're planning for our organizations and our communities. And from there, we start with today. And we tether ourselves, admire ourselves, and surround ourselves and study today. And we do needs assessments about today, and we do environmental scans about today, and we do situational analyses about today, today, today. And then, when we really understand today, we take a little step forward as far as we think we might conceivably do in a year or two, tethered to today. When in fact what we're doing is tethering it to the past. What we're actually creating is reactive strategy rather than proactive strategy that will create the future. And the good news is that you guys know how to create proactive strategy because you already do it all the time. Once Dimitri and I figured this out, we were like kids in a candy store. Every time we did it, it worked. Every time we worked with a client like this, it worked. They were creating change. It was happening fast. They were having fun. All of the stuff that we thought we knew was gone, and all of this great stuff was happening. We said, we've got to tell everybody about this. We've got to share this everywhere. And so we started an organization called Creating the Future. And in the past 2 years, we have trained about 50 people around the world in how to create the futures of their communities. And now it's not just our results, but their results. Let me just share one story about Kim, who is a board member of an education foundation in California, a foundation that supports the public schools in her community. And Kim was asked to chair the board of this foundation at the point where it was doing so horribly that it was about to close, which is the point where everybody wants to be the chair of the board, right? And so Kim said, well, I will do this on one condition, and that is that you let me use this thing that I just learned. And so she asked that first question, slide please. She asked that first question, what kind of community do we really want? And what the Education Foundation Board came to is we want a community where every child can reach their full potential, which makes perfect sense. And they created the path and they led backwards to what they would do. Within 9 months of Kim asking that first question at her first board meeting, during California's worst budget cuts ever, the Education Foundation raised enough money to single-handedly save music education for the entire district. This was a group that was about to close its doors. It happens fast, and it happens every single time we do it. And knowing that made me absolutely crazy. Because I'm sort of like you, I'm a more or less normal person. I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in magical unicorns that are going to come down and that this is going to always happen. And how was this happening? That every single time we did it, stuff happened and it happened fast. So we went back and we researched, and we went back and we studied again. And what we found totally blew our minds, because the reason it happens predictably all has to do with how our brains work. And very specifically, the brain functions of fear and creativity. I always need a drink of water before I talk about fear. So let's talk a little bit about fear. If a pack of javelinas is coming to get me, I am not thinking about creating the future of our world. I am not even thinking about what I am going to do when I get safe. I am just thinking about getting me out of there. When fear is guiding our actions, it actually turns the off switch on just about everything else. But when we humans don't have fear around, we're amazing. I mean, we're connecting to each other, we're creative, our potential is boundless. So now let's apply these two thoughts to how we currently do strategy. And any of you who have been in a strategy session, some of you probably this week, you will recognize this. What do we do with a strategy session? We walk in the room and we talk about the problems. We talk about what's wrong inside our organizations and outside. Oh my gosh, we're going to make payroll next week and the budget has been cut again and now we need to focus on it. We got to be strategic. Okay, let's look at the problems in the community. So we mire ourselves in everything that's wrong and all our defenses go off. And just at that moment we say, okay, it's time for us to be strategic. Let's predict as far as we can, put everything we got on the line into this uncertain future. So now, in addition to all of the day-to-day stuff that we're scared of, now we have the fear of uncertainty. And we wonder why people act badly. And we wonder why we argue over turf. We have actually created systems that reinforce that. So now let's look at what happens when we reverse engineer the future we do want. And we picture that amazing world that we want, that healthy, vibrant world. Close your eyes for a second and just picture a thriving, vibrant world. And I always wish when I ask this question that you could be standing where I am, because every single one of you has a smile on your face. We like that picture. It makes us happy. And what happens because of that is the fear never turns on, because we don't need it. So now we walk backwards from the airport. We say, okay, if this is what we wanted, what has to happen before that? What has to happen before that? What we're actually doing is creating a cause and effect path that we can see. It's not uncertain. I know that if I do A, it's going to lead to B, it's going to lead to C, and it's going to lead to where I'm going. And the exciting part about that goes back to our math example, when I said that it's more practical to aim for what's possible. And the reason for that is all in how our brains work. Just like we can't achieve an amazing world by focusing on poverty, we can't achieve our height of creativity if we're scared. And so by reverse engineering, the process you guys already know in your day-to-day lives, by reverse engineering the future that we want, we actually bypass the fear. We work with our brain's wiring, and we activate our creativity. So let me show you what this looks like in practice, and let's talk about something that is truly scary. Let's talk about AIDS. One of the things that's really scary about AIDS and HIV right now is it's actually in many communities starting to increase again, because many people believe that AIDS has been cured. And so one of the unfortunate things also is that one of the rising populations at risk of AIDS is sexually active seniors. Because, you know, I'd really like to have you picture sitting down with your grandmother and saying, Grandma, here's why you need to use a condom. So this is what's going on in communities all around, and people are trying to figure out, what do we do with this? Well, there was an organization, an AIDS coalition right outside of Toronto, that was just a normal AIDS coalition like any other that you would know, with the exception of one thing. One of the people in their community was Gail, and Gail had trained to be a facilitator with us. And Gail started taking them through the process, asking, what kind of community do we really want? And like I said, this is a normal group, and so they went to the normal place. She said, what do we really want? And they said, we want to eliminate AIDS. They went right to zero, because that's where we go. But Gail knew to ask the question again. She said, great, if we eliminate AIDS, what will our community look like? And they started to dream. Slide, please. And this is what they came up with. We dream of a time and place when everyone is free to live healthy, vital lives. And then they started to create their path backwards. Next slide, please. They said, well, there's many conditions that will lead to leading healthy, vital lives. 2 of them are commitment on the part of the community and also a sense of justice. So they started asking, okay, what would lead to justice? And one of the many things they came up with is compassion. Slide, please. So what leads to compassion? They said, well, a sense of connection. Connection with other people leads to compassion. Well, what would lead to connection? Well, eliminate barriers, and we need to have a sense of inclusivity, sharing stories with each other. What you see very quickly in this series of slides is that they reverse engineered from something that seemed almost unbearably airy-fairy, right? A healthy, vital community. How do we do that? And very quickly, you get down to something we could do. We know how to share stories. We have some thoughts about eliminating barriers. So let me share with you what this AIDS Coalition wound up doing. Next slide, please. They created bright orange t-shirts. And on the back of their t-shirts is their vision statement, and on the front says Community Engagement Team. They now work with the Volunteer Center that anytime there is a volunteer opportunity among senior groups where they can be working side by side with seniors, they show up as a team. They're now working side by side with the very population that they wanted to engage. They're sharing stories, they're sharing their experience, they're learning, they're listening, they're teaching. And I have to tell you, every time I tell that story, I get chills. Because every piece of what they're doing is leading to the world that they want. Next slide, please. If you look at the step of volunteering together and connecting and compassion and justice, each of those pieces is this AIDS Coalition actually being the future that they want to see. And again, this was a normal group, just like every group we know. There was nothing sensational about them except for one thing. They used a different framework for creating the path to the future that they wanted. We are all on a path, every last one of us. That path started long before any of us were a twinkle in anybody's eye, and it is continuing after we are long gone. But the path ahead of us does not have to just be a continuation of our past. And so to show you what that looks like, I'd like to ask you all to please stand up. And if I could get the next slide. And I'd like you to look as far as you can towards the stage here. You can see everything. You see the person's head in front of you. You can see me. You can see the screen. If I asked you, figure out a path to the back of the room, you could easily do it. And if we were outside on a sunny day looking at the Catalinas, you could do it there as well. You could figure out a path between where you are right now and Mount Lemon. And I urge you, when you go back to your desks and life gets frustrating and you can't figure out what's next, look up. Look up. Ask yourself, what do I really want for my world? And start creating the path to that future. Thank you very much.